You're just not someone I want to come home to anymore. That sentence burned itself into my memory more than any needle, any radiation treatment, or even the word cancer itself. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the timing. The way he said it. Felt detached. Like I had become a chore. A dying project he didn't sign up for. My name is Camila. And that was the moment I knew I was more alone than I had ever been in my life. 6 months before I was fine, at least on the outside. A 32-year-old editor living in Chicago, married to a man I thought loved me. Eric was charming, successful, and the kind of man who always knew what to say to get attention. I fell for him quickly, and we married within 2 years of meeting. We were planning a trip to Florence when I first started feeling the fatigue. Then the night sweats. Then the bruises. Thought it was stress. Or maybe anemia. It was stage 3 lymphoma. Cancer doesn't arrive like a thief in the night. It kicks your door in and starts tearing your life apart piece by piece. I'll never forget the sterile white walls of the oncology clinic. The pity in the nurse's eyes. The way my husband squeezed my hand and whispered, "We'll get through this." I believed him. God help me, I did. At first he did what a good husband should. He drove me to my first round of chemo. Bought me headscarves when my hair began to fall out. Made me tea on the nights I was too sick to eat. But slowly those things stopped. The scarf stayed in the bag. The tea turned into silence. And the man who once said, "In sickness and in health," began sleeping in the guest room. One night I walked into the living room just as he was gathering his keys. I hadn't seen him much that week. My body was aching from the last treatment. I was pale, weak, and holding on by a thread. I asked him where he was going. He didn't answer right away. Then he finally looked at me, and I mean looked. Not like someone who loved me. Not like someone who felt pain watching me hurt. But like someone who felt trapped. "That's not really your business anymore," he said. I stood there, blinking through the fog of medications and heartache. "Eric, I'm your wife." He laughed, quietly, bitterly. "You were. Now you're just surviving. That's all this house is about now. Doctors and vomiting and sadness. I can't breathe in here anymore." I didn't know what hurt worse, his words or the fact that I didn't have the strength to stop him as he walked out the door. He didn't come back. Not the next day. Not the day after. Not when I was rushed to the ER for dehydration. Not when I had my lowest scan results. He left me in the thick of it. While I was clinging to life, he was moving on. Partying, dating, living freely while I counted blood cell levels and prayed for my next breath. And yet I didn't break. I wanted to. There were nights I lay curled up on the bathroom floor, clutching my stomach from the pain of chemo, sobbing into the silence. Nights when I stared at the ceiling, asking God if this was how it ended for me. But something inside me refused to die. I began journaling. First for myself, then online. My posts started gaining traction. Other women battling illness, abandonment, grief, they saw themselves in my words. I wasn't just writing pain anymore. I was writing survival. And slowly I began to heal, not just from the disease but from him. From the idea that I was unlovable because I was no longer picture perfect. The day I walked into my final treatment, I didn't cry because I was scared. I cried because I made it. Alone. Scarred, yes, but alive. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. Her cheeks were hollow. Her eyes sunken. Her skin had turned a shade of gray that no amount of concealer could hide. My once thick hair, gone. My lips, chapped, cracked, dry from dehydration and too many medications to count. But it wasn't the physical changes that startled me most. It was what was missing behind my eyes. Hope. That woman wasn't just sick, she was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of hearing, "Be strong." Tired of being the one everyone pitied. Tired of waking up and remembering that Eric was no longer there. But even in that tired face, buried under layers of pain, was a flicker of something, rage maybe. Fire. That was the day I decided I wasn't going to wait for someone to save me. I became my own rescue. Each morning I forced myself out of bed, even if it was just to sit by the window. I started tracking my progress like mini victories. Sat up without vomiting? Victory. Ate a whole meal. Victory. Brushed my teeth without crying? That was the hardest one. Victory. But physical healing wasn't the only mountain. The silence was just as loud. The loneliness was its own kind of cancer. People stopped calling. Even the well-meaning ones. I heard all the clichés. Let us know if you need anything. You're in our prayers. You're so strong. But strength is not a compliment when you're tired of being strong. One day I found an old photo of Eric and me. It was taken on our honeymoon in Maui. I was wearing a red sundress and laughing. Really laughing, the kind that makes your stomach hurt. Eric had his arm around me, his eyes on the camera, but his smile never reached them. I never noticed it then. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I picked up a pen and started writing on the back. This girl deserved better. And she's still in here somewhere. That moment shifted everything. I printed out the photo and taped it above my bathroom mirror. Every morning I looked at it like a dare. You're still here. Now what? When I had enough energy, I started walking to the corner cafe with my headscarf tied tight. People stared, and not always kindly. One barista even said, "Wow, you're so brave to be out and about." I smiled, but inside I thought, brave? For existing while sick. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I kept walking. That cafe became my sanctuary. I'd sit in the corner booth, laptop open, tapping away my thoughts. I wrote about everything. Chemo, heartbreak, the first time I realized Eric wasn't coming back, the time I screamed into a pillow until I passed out. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I didn't pretend to be a warrior. I was human. And that made people listen. I posted my entries on a small blog I named Sick and Still Standing. I expected a few views. Maybe someone's aunt with a similar story. But within weeks, my inbox overflowed. Women from Brazil to Boston were telling me their stories. How their husbands cheated the minute they lost their hair. How their families treated them like burdens instead of fighters. How people only showed up for the funeral, never the fight. Cracked something open in me. For once, I didn't feel invisible. I felt understood. So I pushed harder. I shared before and after pictures. I filmed myself crying through a panic attack, not for sympathy but to show people the truth. And it resonated. My followers doubled. Then tripled. My story was being shared by breast cancer foundations, chronic illness advocates, even celebrities. People didn't want polished. They wanted real. And for the first time in a long time I felt powerful. But with growth came new pain. Eric reached out again. I remember the day clearly. I had just finished a Zoom call with a journalist from a wellness magazine. My inbox chimed. Subject: hope you're doing well. The body of the message? Saw your latest interview. Wow, Camila. You've really turned it around. Maybe we could catch up sometime. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just entitlement wrapped in fake concern. He hadn't seen me in a hospital bed, convulsing from side effects. He didn't see me learning how to walk again after losing 30 pounds. He didn't see the nights I held my own hand because I had no one else to hold it for me. But now that I was being celebrated, now I was worth knowing. I didn't respond. I deleted it. Because that version of Camila, the one who begged him to stay, who cried when he said she made him feel suffocated, she didn't exist anymore. The woman I was now. She was rising. And nothing, not Eric, not the disease, not the scars, was going to pull her back down. I wasn't supposed to survive. Not according to the doctors, not according to the charts, not according to the people who quietly stopped checking in when I didn't bounce back as quickly as they expected. And definitely not according to Eric, the man who made me feel like my illness was an inconvenience instead of a war I never asked to fight. After his email, something shifted inside me. I stopped writing from a place of pain and started writing from power. My words weren't just a cry for connection anymore. They were proof. Proof that life doesn't end when someone else walks away. That recovery isn't linear. That even when you're forgotten, discarded, or abandoned, you can still rise. One afternoon I posted a piece titled, "He left me because I got sick, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me." I didn't name him. I didn't need to. The words spread like wildfire. It was shared by survivors, nurses, therapists. Even major platforms picked it up. My phone didn't stop buzzing for days. Podcasts invited me. Cancer advocacy groups reached out. A documentary producer messaged me about turning my blog into a short film. But I didn't care about the spotlight. What mattered was the emails that poured in from other women like me, who said things like, "You gave me permission to stop apologizing for being sick. I left my husband today. Your words gave me the courage. I thought no one would understand. Now I know I'm not alone." I read every single one. Cried through most of them. And in those messages I found something deeper than purpose. I found my people. I started showing up for others the way I once needed someone to show up for me. I mentored patients. Helped build a virtual support network. I co-founded a nonprofit focused on emotional healing for young adults with chronic illnesses. And my voice. It only got louder. One day I was asked to speak at a national conference for women in recovery. I stood on a stage, bald but bold, scars showing, hands trembling, and I told them everything. About the diagnosis. About the man who left. About the day I thought dying would be easier than fighting. And then about the woman I met in the mirror after I stopped waiting for someone to come save me. I ended the speech with one line. Sometimes rock bottom is the foundation you need to build the rest of your life on. The room went silent. Then applause exploded. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there whole. After the speech, a woman in her 50s hugged me and whispered, "I buried my daughter last year. She had the same cancer. I wish she'd heard you." That night I realized I didn't survive for myself alone. I survived so I could become a voice for every person too broken to speak. And just when I thought I had closed that chapter of my life, the past came knocking again. It was at a fundraising gala. My first public event post-recovery. I was wearing a navy blue off-shoulder gown, my short curls finally growing back, lips painted a bold red. I looked strong. I felt strong. I was being introduced to donors when I heard someone say my name. Not Camila, like most people called me now. But Cammy. His nickname for me. I turned and there he was. He looked older. Not in years but in spirit. His eyes weren't as bright. His posture wasn't as confident. Life hadn't been kind to him. For a moment I froze. Then I smiled. "Eric," I said, calm as ever. He gave a weak smile. "You look incredible." "I know," I replied. We made awkward small talk. He mentioned he'd heard about my nonprofit. That his sister had followed my blog. That he always knew I'd make something of myself. I wanted to laugh. He knew. The same man who left a note and his wedding ring on the kitchen counter because cancer made me too needy? The one who said he felt trapped by my disease? The one who packed up and left while I was in the middle of my 3rd round of chemo? That man now wanted to rewrite history? I nodded politely. "I hope you're doing well," I said. He stared for a long time before asking, "Do you think maybe sometime we could talk? Really talk?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Eric, I don't speak to ghosts." And then I turned away. Not with bitterness. Not with anger. With peace. Because closure doesn't always come in neat little apologies or storybook endings. Sometimes it comes in knowing you didn't just survive what broke you. You transcended it. That night I went home, removed my makeup and stared at the mirror. But this time the woman staring back at me didn't look tired. She looked powerful. Recovery taught me more about life than any university ever could. When you're forced to rebuild from the ashes of your old self, you realize what truly matters. The fake friends disappear. The people who only showed up when it was convenient? Gone. The man who promised forever but ran at the first sign of weakness? A fading shadow in my rear view. But me. I remained. I endured. I evolved. And when I came back, I didn't come back quietly. I invested my pain into purpose. I channeled every ounce of heartbreak into rebuilding my body, mind, and spirit. The nonprofit I co-founded? It grew faster than we could have imagined. What started as a small community blog turned into a national support network. We had volunteers in 12 states, fundraising partnerships with major organizations, and an annual retreat for survivors that became a sacred space for healing. My face, once pale and tired from chemotherapy, now beamed on posters, magazine covers, and advocacy campaigns. I was featured on Good Morning America, interviewed for Time, and even invited to consult on a healthcare policy bill in D.C. They called me a symbol of strength. But I didn't care about titles or press. I cared about impact. I cared about the 16-year-old girl in Florida who emailed me after reading my blog. She was newly diagnosed, terrified, and certain her boyfriend would leave her. I called her personally. She cried for 20 minutes before saying, "You're the first person who made me feel like I could still have a future." I cared about the widowed nurse who attended our retreat and said, "I came here grieving. I'm leaving with purpose." These were my victories. But like all stories that circle back, mine came full loop in the most unexpected way. It was a year after the gala where I last saw Eric. I was invited to keynote a global women's empowerment summit in New York. The venue? The same hotel where Eric and I had once stayed during our dream vacation years ago. Back when love still felt permanent. I almost said no. But then I remembered, this wasn't our place anymore. It was mine now. When I arrived, the suite was elegant. White roses. A handwritten welcome card from the event organizers. A balcony that overlooked the skyline. And yet, there was something poetic about standing in the same place where I once held his hand, wondering if love could survive sickness, and realizing I no longer needed his love to feel whole. I spoke that night in front of a crowd of thousands. My speech wasn't about illness or heartbreak. It was about rebirth. About finding the fire in your own wreckage. About writing your own ending when life tries to end you. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted nearly a minute. I stepped backstage, heart pounding, not from nerves but from the sheer magnitude of it all. A woman who was once too weak to sit upright was now commanding rooms full of leaders, doctors, survivors, and dreamers. Then a staff member handed me a note. No signature. Just one sentence. "I'm sorry for not being the man you needed. But seeing who you've become, you were always destined for more." I didn't respond. Because closure doesn't require an answer. Just truth. And I already had mine. Weeks later, a journalist writing a feature on me asked the question people always ask. What would you say to the person who left you? I smiled, looked into the camera, and said, "Thank you." The journalist blinked. "Thank you." Yes. Because if he hadn't walked away, I might still be waiting for permission to be great. I might have shrunk myself to fit into a life I'd already outgrown. He thought he was discarding me, but really he was setting me free. That quote went viral. Women printed it on shirts. It became a soundbite on TikTok. Some called it savage. Others called it healing. I just called it truth. Because the greatest revenge isn't hate. It's success. It's healing. It's walking into every room they said you'd never enter, and owning it like you built it. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who could walk past her past without blinking. But life has a way of showing you who you are when you're forced to rebuild everything from scratch. And sometimes, it gives you front row seats to watch karma take center stage. It started with a phone call. A producer from a well-known documentary series was reaching out. They were filming a segment on women who had turned their pain into purpose and wanted to feature my story. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to relive it all publicly again. But then she said something that struck me. "We don't just want your survival story. We want your power story." So I said yes. Filming began 2 months later. Cameras followed me as I spoke at schools, visited hospitals, and held survivor circles in places that used to scare me. Oncology wings, support group basements, recovery clinics. Places that once smelled like fear, now felt like purpose. One day, while filming at a charity fundraiser, the producer pulled me aside and asked, "Would you be willing to speak with people from your past, anyone who shaped this journey?" I smiled. They shaped me by leaving. That was the most powerful conversation they ever had with me. She nodded, but I could tell the idea was stirring. Later that night I found myself scrolling. Just curious. I typed Eric's name into the search bar. He popped up immediately, LinkedIn profile updated, still working in finance, still using the same smile that once made me weak in the knees. But something was off. His company had merged and downsized, and it looked like he'd been moved to a mid-level role. Not bad, but nowhere near what he used to boast about. Then I saw it, divorced. No kids. A strange emotion tugged at me. Not joy. Not pity. Just Clarity. Life had moved forward for both of us. But only one of us had truly risen. A few weeks later, I was invited to a tech and wellness summit in Austin. I had no idea who the other speakers would be, until I walked into the speaker lounge and saw him. Eric. I froze for only a second. Then straightened my spine and walked past like I hadn't just come face to face with the ghost of who I used to be. But he saw me. He stood up so fast his coffee spilled. Madison. I turned slowly, every part of me calm. Eric. He stared like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I guessed to him I was supposed to still look fragile, broken, maybe bitter. But instead I was glowing. You here? As a speaker. I am. Headlining the second day. I smiled. You. Panel discussion. On fiscal recovery. His voice dropped a little. It's been a rough few years. I nodded politely. Life has a way of teaching us things. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe explain. Maybe apologize. But I didn't give him the chance. I hope the panel goes well, I said simply. Excuse me. I have prep to do. And just like that I walked away. That evening I stepped onto a stage in front of 2,000 people. My photo flashed across the screen with the title, From Abandoned to Empowered, How I Turned a Diagnosis into Destiny. And while I spoke I saw him. Sitting in the crowd. Watching. Listening. But this time I wasn't looking for his approval. This time he was just another face in the audience of my comeback. After the session people lined up to meet me. Take photos. Share their stories. Cry in my arms. And somewhere in the back I saw him slip out quietly. No drama. No confrontation. Just silence. But even silence speaks volumes. Weeks passed. The documentary aired and went viral. My story became part of a larger conversation about resilience, abandonment, and reclaiming your narrative. I started a scholarship fund for young survivors. Was offered a book deal. And finally, I began to live life on my terms. Then came the message. A handwritten letter. No return address. It said, I was wrong. About everything. You were never a burden. You were the best thing I ever had. I see that now. I'm sorry for not staying. For not fighting. I just didn't know how to handle it. But seeing who you've become, I wish I could undo it all. I folded the letter, placed it in a box labeled closure, and tucked it away. Because I didn't need his words anymore. My validation came from every woman I inspired. Every battle I faced and won. Every mirror I looked into and saw power staring back. And then, love found me again. Not the kind that made grand promises and ran at the first storm. But the kind that sat beside me during rain and said, we'll get through it. He was a doctor I met during one of my hospital outreach events. Compassionate. Steady. The kind of man who didn't flinch at scars, he honored them. We married in a small ceremony under a tree filled with lanterns. My son carried the rings. My best friend gave the toast. And every person there knew that the woman in white wasn't a victim of her story. She was the author of it. I used to wonder what closure looked like. Was it an apology? A tearful reunion? A conversation that made sense of everything? For the longest time I thought I needed that from Eric. I thought I needed him to see me, to say sorry, to admit what he did. But now I know closure isn't about them. It's about you. It's when you stop bleeding from the wounds they gave you, and start wearing the scars like armor. 3 years after my diagnosis, I stood on the cover of Resilience magazine with the headline, She survived, she thrived, now she's changing lives. The interview trended for weeks. My inbox overflowed with messages from women, mothers, wives, daughters, telling me how my story gave them hope. One morning while walking into my foundation's new headquarters, yes, we finally had an official building thanks to donations and a few quiet investors. I passed the security desk and the guard handed me a visitor log sheet. You've got a name listed here, he said. Didn't leave a message. Just signed in and left. It was Eric. I hadn't seen or heard from him since the letter. No email. No call. Just that one moment at the summit and then silence. I stood there staring at his name, wondering if he'd meant to come in, or if just seeing my name on the door was enough to shake him. Either way, I didn't reach out. Because I had nothing to say. My life had bloomed in ways I never imagined. The girl who once curled up in a hospital bed, afraid of what the next scan might say, now sat on national panels about healthcare reform. I became an ambassador for a major medical nonprofit. My book hit bestseller list. I even had a candle brand collaboration, because healing isn't just science. It's ritual. It's hope. It's scent and softness and reclaiming joy in the small things. Eric became a distant memory. A faded photograph in a chapter long closed. But karma has a rhythm, and it plays louder when the world is watching. One day while scrolling through social media, a video popped up. It was a podcast clip. A man speaking bitterly about how women switch up once they make it. I almost kept scrolling, until the camera panned and I recognized the voice. Eric. He was ranting. Saying things like, I supported her until she changed. Claiming I became cold and prideful. That I used the divorce for attention. He didn't mention the truth. That he left me. That he vanished when I needed him most. That he told me I was too much, too weak, too broken. I didn't respond. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't need to. Because in the comments, thousands of women stood up for me. They corrected him. Called out his hypocrisy. Reminded him and the world of the receipts. Of my receipts. My work. My impact. My journey. I wasn't the girl crying in the dark anymore. I was the woman setting fire to lies with the light of her truth. A few weeks later, I received an invitation from a television network to guest host a special segment on survivors turning CEOs. The irony? It was the same network Eric once pitched financial content to. Full circle. The night of the taping I walked through the same halls I used to dream about. Back when I thought life had passed me by. I wore a tailored white suit, my hair slicked back, my skin glowing. I felt powerful. Not because I had made it big, but because I had made it through. They seated me on set, counted down, and the cameras rolled. And there I was. Speaking not as the woman who got left, but as the woman who rose anyway. When the segment ended and the lights dimmed, one of the producers whispered, Your story, it's changed people. I smiled. It changed me first. That night, I walked out of the studio into cool evening air and met my husband at the curb. He stepped out, opened the car door, kissed my hand. We drove home in silence. Comfortable, sacred silence. And when my son ran to hug me at the door, I realized. This is the life I was always meant for. Not the pain. Not the betrayal. But the strength it gave me. The wisdom it carved into my bones. The peace that only comes after walking through fire barefoot and coming out the other side burning brighter. Eric's regret could never touch me. His version of the story couldn't dim mine. Because I no longer needed to be remembered by the one who left. I was remembered by the world I helped heal. So to anyone out there crying in silence, wondering if the pain will ever stop, hear me when I say, the pain is real. The betrayal is cruel. But your comeback will be legendary. And when it happens, don't look back. Just rise. Like I did. Like you will. Like, comment and share this story if it touched something deep in you. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more powerful stories. New ones drop every day. You don't want to miss what comes next.